6:28 Pacific time right now, so don't get alarmed if you're on the East Coast here, but we're looking at Santa Monica. Gorgeous shot of the Santa Monica Pier, courtesy of EarthCam. Good morning, California. If you're just waking up to us, you're waking up to this news. Voters in the Golden State rejecting this, a ballot measure that would raise the state minimum wage to $18 per hour by 2026. Didn't pass, but if it did, it would have been the highest in the nation.
Wait, so you're saying liberal California voted against this?
They did.
All right, that's the takeaway. And opponents said it would have increased cost. Can you imagine? Leading to higher taxes and pushing those smaller businesses, encouraging them to cut jobs. However, people who wanted to see it happen, they said the measure would have benefited some 2 million workers. All right, let's discuss it now with Jim Schultz, the president of the Minnesota Private Business Council. Brandon Arnold is the executive vice president of the National Taxpayers Union. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for coming on. Jim, we'll start with you. The fact that it failed in California, what are your takeaways on this?
Well, Emma, you could kind of think of California as a factory for every terrible idea in the country, and this is, of course, one of them. And it is really great that it died here in California because you won't see it spread to other places like here in Minnesota or New York or Massachusetts. So that's a great outcome. This would have hurt workers. It would have hurt the local economy. It would have hurt consumers. And so it's a great outcome for the people of California. And of course, it's a little bit surprising considering the liberal outlook of California typically.
Yeah, Brandon, Californians have historically supported efforts to raise the minimum wage and are reporting that there was somewhat of a surprise. Can you talk to why maybe we shouldn't be surprised by that?
Yeah, I mean, you look at what happened in April. They raised the minimum wage for fast food workers up to an astonishing $20 an hour. And what happened in the state? Well, guess what? Prices went up and businesses shuttered, just as economics would predict there. We saw one restaurant chain, Rubio's, a Mexican restaurant chain, they closed 48 stores in the state. So we talk about this as good for workers. What about the workers that used to be employed, but their business closed and they don't have a job anymore? So it's good for maybe a handful of workers, but it's bad for a lot of workers. And it's also bad for consumers who have to deal with rising prices on top of what we've already seen on a national scale where prices are absolutely out of control.
Yeah, I've seen it on diner menus where they just put a piece of tape over the price and then they write in the higher price just because everything costs so much more. I mean, it's these businesses that are reacting to the economy. Speaking of, by the way, President-elect Donald Trump says he's going to nominate Wall Street executive Howard Lutnick to serve as the Secretary of Commerce. Jim, what do you make of this choice?
I think it's a great choice. Howard Lutnick has a really impressive background on Wall Street and beyond in our country. Of course, headed the Trump transition team here. He's a very impressive guy. He'll do great at the Commerce Department. So I think this is one really great pick for the American economy.
And Lutnick was on CNBC earlier this month talking about tariffs, a major talking point for the campaign of President-elect. Here's what he had to say.
So here was the idea. Put a tariff out and say to the company, if you come to America and you produce in America, you get a tax credit for your tariff. So come to America, build in America. And I've spoken to lots. This came from discussions with lots of industry groups. And they said, if you give us 2 years, we can manufacture in America. We'll bring our production to America. And if you give us back our tariff money, we're good with that. That's where that policy came from.
It seems like a savvy talking point coming from Lutnick. Brandon, your thoughts there, and then what he could do effectively as the Secretary of Commerce.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously wanted the Treasury role and got Commerce as a consolation prize, though he is going to have a significant role over trade, overseeing as well the USTR's office, U.S. Trade Representative's office here. I think he's oversimplifying things a little bit when it comes to manufacturing. It's not a situation where manufacturers either make stuff in the United States or they make stuff abroad. A lot of times our manufacturers bring in intermediate goods or they bring in raw materials to produce things on United States soil, or manufacturing happens here as well as in multiple countries. So I think it's a lot more complicated than what he's letting on. And I do think that if we are too aggressive in this tariff posture, that we could see higher prices and more supply chain disruption. So I do think there is a lot of danger in what we're talking about here. We're going to have to tread very carefully if we're going to get it right.
Again, this has been a strong campaign promise on now behalf of President-elect Trump. We're still waiting to see who's going to be Treasury Secretary. You're right. So perhaps that comes today or tomorrow. Either way, stay with Newsmax. Jim Schultz and Brandon Arnold, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the U.S.